how did that whole concept of linear drumming become birthed to you?
My system basically was about rhythms, about stickings, and the result of putting rhythms and stickings together. That was the biggest thing. When I came out of college, I had seen a lot of rhythm stuff. Magadini's book was out. There was another book called Rhythms of Contemporary Music. I remember I worked on it. There were a few other books out. I just saw that there was room for more stuff. And the thing I think that was different about my book was that it was basically pieces. It wasn't exercises, it was pieces. You had to have good dynamic control. You had to have very good switching between rhythms control. It wasn't just about playing in rhythms. It was about doing something with them. And so as I did that, the one thing that was bothering me with the sticking system was there was no bass drum. I hadn't gotten the bass drum in. I used the bass drum under the stickings, as we all do. But I hadn't figured out any way to get it inside a sticking. And then I realized there was no way. Because if you're playing a 3-note sticking and you stick a bass drum in place of the second note, then you got a single and a double. And that's not the sticking. That doesn't give the sound of the sticking. It's something else. So I couldn't figure out any way to get the bass drum in. So then I said, okay, I'll just use single strokes, 2 through 8 groupings, and the whole concept is about putting them together, mixing them. So if you take a 3 and a 5, you can make a 2-beat phrase. You can make a 16-measure phrase. And phrasing is not a lot of drummers' strong suit. So it was kind of a simple way to show guys how you could take a simple phrase and expand it. At some point along there, I ran into tablas, and I started practicing tablas for a while. I studied them for about 5 years really hard. And then my teacher said, if you ever really want to get this, you're going to have to move to India for some years. And I couldn't do it. I had a family, I had a job here, and I didn't want to just screw around with them. Like a lot of guys, when I was at Berkeley, I hired a tabla teacher, a good one. He's the guy I eventually studied with, to give classes. In the beginning, it was about 20 students. By a month and a half, it was 7 students. By 6 months, it was 2 students, me and one of my friends. Because to them, it was just like a little something different. I saw one of these guys play tablas on a gig. He thought he knew something, so he was playing just a couple of strokes and thinking like, oh, this is great, man. Where to me, I was saying, man, you're not giving the instrument any credit. You're treating it like a fucking drum, like a snare drum or something. Just hit it and it'll work. So that's where the linear system came from. And then it was, which way do I want to go? Do you want to do it with all the various combinations between the stickings, which is kind of what I, chose because it gave the most phrasing possibilities. In the first book that I presented it, which is the time functioning book, I didn't know a lot of stuff. I really didn't. So it's very brief there. Then later you get a whole book out of it, and that's much broader.
Yeah. Well, the idea that you concentrated on phrasing and sort of, somehow embedded the idea of phrasing into the drummer's head, maybe without them even knowing it, is pretty brilliant because I think that even now, dare I say it's an overlooked thing. And I say, dare I say, because I listen and I'm listening sometimes for, I don't know why, I couldn't tell you what the reason is, I'm listening for phrases. And I think it's because on some level, I'm realizing that I'm not hearing them.
Yeah.
And so then I start looking for something that I don't feel like I'm getting. Like, you get used to eating a certain meal and you go, what happened to the chili pepper? They didn't put it in there. You know what I mean? So you start adding it. And I'm thinking, like, where did that go? What happened to phrasing? What happened to, like, you would hear people back in the old, I don't know, bebop and post-bop days that it was all about phrasing. And not only was it about phrasing, but it was actually about building phrases into a composition. If they solo it. There's a great black and white video that I've seen. You can see it on YouTube of Frankie Dunlop. Man,
wow,
underrated, holy mackerel, in my opinion. And he's playing, and it's a slow tempo, and he's playing a solo on Blue Monk. it's like probably, it might be some of the most important 16 bars that I've ever heard, because what he does, and he's doing it at a slow tempo, and then you hear the phrases and how he builds the phrases. It's a masterclass in phrasing and composing by building phrases, and slow too, not up tempo. And I'm just gonna fly here I go, watch me, watch this. No, try doing it at like 50 or something, you know what I mean? Try that on for size, and then call me up and let me know how that goes. So,
well, the thing is that I don't really hear any music out there. I don't listen that much to music because I hate almost everything that I hear. But most of the music, when I do listen to it, the phrases are, if anything, they're getting shorter. I hear whole tunes that are 2-beat repetitive phrases. They don't have any harmonic movement most of the time because it's not about that. It's just about presenting the words in the song. So I don't hear, if you go back and look in the 40s, there are hundreds of tunes with words or without words that have 8-measure phrases and have larger forms, like 32 measures. You don't hear a 32-measure tune anymore. No. You don't hear an 8-measure tune anymore. So I feel sorry for the guys, because that gives you some room to maneuver instead of just playing your tune over and over again.
Yeah.
Space, you could do more stuff. Not a lot of stuff, but some stuff.
Yeah, a tune from like Fascinating Rhythm. We can name dozens of tunes from that era, or from spanning several decades. But I know exactly what you mean. It's crazy. It's like repetitive, a couple of things that, and then maybe it gets built on. And the thing about it is that the protocol and the rules have changed, whereby some things have been eliminated that I think are vital. The harmonic language and melodic language.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and forget about the rhythm stuff. That's a can of worms that I'm not even going to open here. But just the song forms. And I can identify people that have taken these forms, these reduced forms, and done pretty cool things with them, but that doesn't justify reducing the form to me. Also, cite dozens of other that have taken that kind of new reduced form, and it's just garbage. So, and really, most of it that I think gets pumped down the mainstream is just homogenized sort of garbage, and not to mention that what it's dressed in is pretty vile. And if you're going to normalize that kind of stuff, I don't think it bodes well for society, and I don't think that people should say, well, we're products of our society in order to belch that garbage out. If you're going to be a role model as a musician, don't tell me, hey, I'm a product of my society, therefore, baloney. So, and meanwhile, good art is clamoring to be heard. And at the same time, it's almost like the same old song, really. But at the same time, there's so much talent out there, more than ever, probably. The level keeps getting raised. Yet at the same time, there's so much mindless pap that's just being propagated to the masses. It's just almost a hilarious paradox. If we talk about this stuff and it gets to people, hey, great. It needs to be heard.
Funny, because of my affiliation with Mick Goodrick, one of the greatest guitar players that I ever heard and had the opportunity to play with, I did so many duos. I did Mick and John Abercrombie. In other words, I heard all of these different guitar players, top of the line. None of them played the same. They all had their own sound, their own style, their own way of phrasing. In the last 6 months or so, I've been going back through all my old stuff, old recordings of gigs and stuff. And one of the things I realized was how little I was paying attention to what was going on. I don't know what I was thinking about. I really don't. Because now when I listen, and I listen to what the soloists are doing, that's not what I was hearing. I don't know what I was hearing, but it wasn't that.
Really?
I'm trying to figure it out. I don't know what the answer is.
Mm-hmm. Really? So in retrospect, you're wondering what you were thinking because you didn't think that you were listening well enough? What am I getting here?
No, on a different level. It was in a different place.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that I wasn't interacting. Of course I was interacting. I was pretty much an aggressive drummer in a small group. So I would get in there and mix it up with them all the time. I did not lay back. I did not just play time.
Mm-hmm.
Just my style.
Yeah.
And so So when I listened to like the guitar players, going back to them and how they phrase, and it wasn't exactly the way that I was phrasing, but I did incorporate a lot of things that I heard them doing first, like where they would put their cadences. Because when you move your cadences around, as you know, on top of the form, so you don't cadence on one at the end of the 8-measure phrase, you cadence on 2 of the 3rd measure. And what that does is it loops the time. So you're seeing the canvas has the same form all the time, but every time you go back and draw something over it, it comes out differently. It's never the same.
Profoundly said. Yeah, I understand now.